Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's cast about Dungeons and Dragons and Disabilities. I'm Tiefyweefy, as most of you probably know. This is a bit of a different cast for me tonight. I don't usually do this kind of stuff. I have talked about disability and other sorts of things on Twitch before and on other casts before, but this is really the first time that I'm going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons specifically. So I hope you guys will at least be a little bit entertained, and I hope that we can at least have a fun discussion about some of this, but most importantly, just so that everyone kind of knows what my experience with Dungeons and Dragons is and why I care about it as much as I do, and why it's an integral part of my personality and the way I represent myself as a VTuber and all that kind of stuff. Hi, Collie. Hello, good to see you. Thanks for joining me. So, I guess I'll just start out by saying that actually one of the biggest things that inspired me to make tonight's cast was just a lot of my new friends and fellow VTubers were just very interested in, well, what is my connection with Dungeons and Dragons, since on Twitter I am a tiefling VTuber. So there was that. But also they were just kind of curious just about what kind of experiences I had had and all that kind of stuff. So this cast is really just for them and for those of you who are curious about that part of my identity, let's say. This is just to give you some more context. So yeah, I hope it's fun. So I'm gonna start with actually reading a little bit of an article that I had written back in the summer of last year, shortly after getting on Twitter and kind of around the time that everything was going down with Mustang's art, aka Sara Thompson, and their combat chair, and all of the drama that was surrounding that at the time, with people not really having, some people, I should say, not having a very good response to a magic item being created to represent wheelchair use in Dungeons and Dragons, and the what it sort of said about the tabletop community and some things that we still have to work through. So that's a little bit of an introduction as to why I wrote the article that I'm going to read now. It wasn't ever published, but I do want to share it here because I'm really proud of it, and I think it gives some good background into things, as I said. So it begins. So I debated writing this. For days and weeks, I have debated putting down my thoughts about my experiences, not only as a player with a disability, but as a dungeon master with a disability. You may be asking yourselves, why debate about something like that? Why hold back about writing down an experience like that, especially if it's one that you've had? Well, because for the longest time, to be honest with you, I didn't consider that perspective valuable. I didn't think my experience as a player and a dungeon master with a disability would have any real bearing on the culture of tabletop roleplay or the community interested in exploring my disabled identity through a fantasy role-playing sense. I always thought of myself as being in my own small, far off corner, in which I was the only one interested in exploring those kinds of things. And so I never really thought about sharing it at all, or that anyone would be interested in knowing that I existed. I just thought, well, this is something I'm doing, representing my disabled identity, and that's something that's important to me. So I'll just do my thing and not bother to bring attention to myself. After all, I felt there tended to be this viewpoint in society that if you bring too much attention to what you're doing, that you're just doing it for that purpose, to attention seek or get validation. So I kept my disability-centered roleplay and game running to myself. I kept it amongst my friends and my role models, never really thinking that I would need to roll up and show up for a larger discussion. Was I wrong? Enter a couple of weeks ago, when Sara Thompson dropped their homebrew item, the combat chair, and it was picked up by an internet blog as a good story. From that moment on, this homebrew item, originally created for the sole purpose of allowing a person with a disability to have the option to roleplay their disability or wheelchair use in their adventure, suddenly became the atom bomb to the rest of the tabletop community. And I see Colley's comments about wanting to show the piece I wrote on my screen, or through my Scribble rather. I would rather not, just because I'm already anxious kind of reading this. But if people want to be able to read it later, I can do that. It's also just mostly because there might still be things that I didn't clean up from my pseudo dragon helping me write this, so that's kind of the other reason that I don't want to show it, in case there is some not as perfect stuff in this, because again, I wasn't ever planning to publish it or share it or anything, so I'll probably just keep that to myself for now, if that's all right with you. Anyway, I'm going to find my place again. Suddenly, it wasn't just an item made to represent disability or give the option to a specific demographic. The community at large lost its mind. People from all over the internet started going after Sara and their creation, saying that they were destroying the game itself by even asking people to make room and accommodate. They continually took issue with the need for a wheelchair, its fairness when compared to other items and abilities in a first-level character. Worst of all, though, many of these people seemed to take issue with disability itself, with the very idea that they would have to share the table with a party member who is so clearly differently abled. Someone clearly in need of a unique combat system and assistive device. There were comments ranging the gamut of, I would just push the chair over, or I would dump them off a cliff if they were even in my game, or let's not forget the even more troubling, even if they wanted to play a character like that, I would just force them to be healed as soon as possible. Or even this little gem, with adventurers like that, who needs a horde of goblins to stop them? Just put a flight of stairs in the way. Just put a pit in front of them. And all of those comments had one common denominator. They were intolerant, they were cruel, and they were fundamentally the reason why Sara Thompson created their combat chair in the first place. I don't think they anticipated what kind of war they would fight with it. Which is why I felt the need to pen this little piece of personal history with the game. Because these comments, these unwelcoming and downright vicious perceptions of disability inclusion, need to be spoken out against. It needs to be addressed directly because these sorts of beliefs and opinions, in my opinion, have no place in a role-playing game designed to tell a variety of stories, uplift a variety of heroes. For a bit of context, when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in the winter of 2017, I'd never played a role-playing game like that in my life. I had never considered that I would even enjoy a game where I got to create a character and go on an adventure. Even with being a writer and a storyteller by trade, I wasn't initially well versed in this culture, in this world of stats, proficiency bonuses, tools, magic items, spells, and the like. But when I decided I was interested in playing, I decided that my first character was going to be a warlock. And that she was going to be built from the beginning to represent my disability. I went to meet up where everyone was doing their character creation, and I met with my DM. I was pleasantly surprised to see that he was also a wheelchair user and might be quote-unquote game for my character concept. This was a relief, as earlier in the morning I had been worrying about how this would go over with whomever was running the game. Because most players want advantages and not disadvantages. But as I talked with him, he expressed admiration and interest in my choice to roleplay a disability. Not the exhaustion or unwillingness, perhaps, that I had been prepared to receive. Because I had chosen to be a magic class with a sugar daddy patron, I was fine taking hits to my strength, constitution, and dexterity stats. Not only because this would allow me to accurately represent my disability in real life, I walk slowly and don't have the best balance in a world where I can easily be affected by whatever surface I'm walking on. But because of this, it also left me open to have other stats be more fully utilized. Stats such as wisdom and charisma, intelligence too, to show that I was using something else to make up for my physical lack. My DM signed off on a 10-foot movement speed. He signed off on what I asked for, which was no ability to climb, swim, or jump. He allowed me to take the idea of a quarterstaff, 2 of them, and make them into not only a makeshift pair of crutches, but my arcane foci, the objects responsible for channeling my spells and my magic. In addition, when it came time to choose my magic spells, he allowed me to have the ritual use of an unseen servant to act as my helper. In this way, I could have another entity help me with chores. Mage Hand was also among those chosen magical spells, as it allowed me to reach and manipulate things without necessarily using my physical body. In the beginning, I started out with my makeshift crutches and a few spells to help me on my adventure. I had the idea that my patron would ask more of me for even giving me magic to begin with, but I was excited to see how my DM would weave his disability dialogue together with my ideas. I was excited to see how heroic and fanciful my disability could be now that my character existed in a world of his creation. So the adventure began. And just as a side note, for those of you who have been around a while, this first character that I'm referencing here is actually the person you've gotten to know as my mother, just for reference. This is the character that's being referenced here. So that will take on a bit more meaning, obviously. Now that I've told you this. And yes, I have activated my overlay. And now I see that Dinah Sawyer is here, so hello. I do have my overlay up. For some reason, it's not being super friendly with me right now, but hopefully, maybe I need to just quickly, change the overlay here. So, give me a quick second. Okay, I'm going to see if that's any better. Thank you, everyone, for being patient. Let me just. Okay. Okay. You still wanna read along with me? Okay, okay. But I'm telling you, if there are any spelling mistakes, you're gonna have to look at my pseudo dragon for that. I'm just telling you. Okay, fine. I will beam my written piece through my scribble so you can see it. Just give me a quick second to get my scribble changed over. And Sherry, I do see you're redeemed for a Tiefyweefy, so I'm gonna do that very quickly here while I'm working on some other things. So. Let me make sure I have the right document brought up. Okay, I need to switch. Hold on. I need to switch the one I have active here. That was my other notes. Okay, there we go. Oh, fun times. Okay. See, Collie, this is what you get. This is what you get for asking me to beam my stuff. Hope you're happy. Yeah, and my pseudo dragon that helps me write takes a lot of training. Oh, Collie, what's the not like this for? Please tell me it's showing up okay. And then I'm not giving away any other wizard secrets. I would hate to be giving out my true name now. I hope none of that is showing. That's the last thing I need right now. Okay. Okay, well, fine then. Okay. Now I have to remind myself where I was in my thing I was reading. Oh well. Yes. Well, the character I'm reading about now, is actually, you all know her as my mother. So, that's just to give this a little bit of context that the character being referenced here, being created, was actually my mother. So, I don't know how meta that is. But anyway, come on, Tiefy, pick up where you. Okay. Okay. I see now. In the beginning, I started out with my makeshift crutches and a few spells to help me on my adventure. Okay. I think I already read that, but whatever. So the adventure began. He put me, and my traveling companions in the back of a wagon, as that was the easiest way for us both to reach the town. From there, he had us meet the other members of our party at the tavern and take on our first quest. From that moment on, the game partially became about him, my DM, brilliantly solving how to move me around his world, in and through a dungeon, without negating my disability-centered roleplay. And that's, kind of one of the big reasons I wanted to share this article and kind of talk about it, is because there is a way you can DM that assists someone in their disability dialogue, not erase it or negate it or gloss over it. Yes, I did do the wiggle, but I'm gonna do another one just cause. So, wiggle. Hopefully that still worked. Anyway. I hope it showed up, cause yay. Okay, if you can tell, Tiffany is kind of stressed. Because I'm trying to read and I keep getting distracted while reading. Okay. It challenged him to ultimately come up with my version of the combat chair before the combat chair. An infernal version of Tensor's disc. One that would be available for me to ride on and command as long as I was conscious and as long as I did not get thrown or knocked from it. This had been devised by my dungeon master, not because my party members got irritated with my slower movement or tired of me role-playing these aspects of my disability that were complicating, but rather because I needed some way to move in combat. I needed some way to respond more quickly as the party's magic caster, and because he, playing as my infernal patron, needed some way to ingratiate himself to me. I remember before he gave me this magic item, he asked me, "Is it okay that I do this? Is it okay that I give you this disc and maybe some more items later to help with your disability, but use those to wrap you around your patron's finger to really illustrate what a demon he is?" And I said, "Yes." Thanks, Dinosaur. I will take my time, and I'm gonna try not to stress. And Collie, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're just wanting me to show off a little more, and that's fine. I replied without hesitation that yes, he could and should. I wanted my warlock character, aka my mother, to explore the darkness of the pact she had made. He was concerned that if he did this too much, that I might feel negatively about my choice to roleplay as a disabled warlock, but I told him not to worry. I told him that this would give my party members a reason to fight for me, to fight this evilness. It would give my party members a reason to intervene when and if the patron required more and more of me to give me all of the strength and power I desired. He went through with it. He made the patron go after my warlock, go after her physical weakness, to underline my true strength, which was the strength of my spirit, the strength of my conviction to complete my quest, no matter my differences. No matter if my magical benefactor tried to twist it in on me, make me dance on his puppet strings. It was a challenging dialogue that I proceeded to roleplay through, but it was worth it. I got to watch myself and my party members grapple with story elements that, had I just chosen to play as an able-bodied character, we wouldn't have gotten to. There would have been no reason to explore it. And even though my DM wasn't able to finish this campaign, I ended up inheriting it from him and finishing it just between myself and my partner. It left me feeling empowered. It left me feeling like, as a player, I had options open. I had the whole world to choose from. And that even if I had to make some pre-existing items work differently than they were intended, I could fashion something unique and meaningful out of it. And it was with that empowering player experience that I got interested in being a DM. At first, I did it just for myself and my partner. This is where my takeover of the original campaign came in. That was my playtest, to play that original character all the way through to her end. And all the way to her good conclusion, where she was not only a hero with a disability, but a wife and mother, a symbol to a whole kingdom because of her deeds, the deeds of her family. From there, I started doing one-shots. I started going to D&D meetings when those were still a thing and hosting short games. At those meetings, I was the only other person besides my original DM with a disability working in that capacity. I was nervous. I was unsure if my players would want to play with me because I was visibly not like every other game master sitting around their tables. But by chance or not, I started attracting other people with disabilities to my table for a game. Not all of them had physical disabilities, but each of them had their own challenge in life, their own difference physically, emotionally, or mentally that other players didn't face, and they somehow found their way around to my table. While I wasn't doing a disability focus in the one shot, it eventually grew into a campaign. I was providing a non-judgmental, disability-friendly space. Not because I was deliberately advertising that was what I did. It wasn't even conscious that I was doing that until later. It just was because of who I was being in that space, who I am still in those spaces. I provided an environment for my players, who are all now my best friends, for them to role play however they wanted. For them to participate in the game without ever worrying that I might make them feel ostracized or ridiculed for the ways their real-life disabilities came into play when role-playing their characters. I modeled patience and kindness. I modeled flexibility. I modeled a culture around my table of not needing to be the best at everything, not needing to prove their worth to the party, but instead embracing the role play, embracing themselves, whatever that looked like on any given day. I like to think that I gave them and myself a counter dialogue, a counter culture to what we typically find around many tables. I've had my players tell me that I do D&D different, that I have a different flow and vibe from other tables they've been at, and even though I feel a bit egotistical in saying so, I have to admit that it makes me feel good. I have to admit that it makes feeling like being the odd one out as a player and a DM in 2017 and 2019 worth it. Because my players reflect back to me my value, that even though I'm in a wheelchair most of the time, and sometimes my voice gets tight and stressed when I'm trying to describe something, or that I have a muscle spasm in the middle of combat, that they enjoy my perspective. Hello there, Aiden. Yes, I did start back in 2017. So I've been doing the Dungeons and Dragons thing for a little bit, but not as long as some people. They enjoy not just the disability aspect that I may bring in if they want to play their character that way, but my emotionality, my depth of feeling and character when it comes where the focus is not just on what you can do, but who you are playing when playing that character. It's because of both of these experiences on either side of the DM screen that I have had a positive experience with my disability in a way that I could have never imagined before I got involved with D&D, and I want this so badly for others. And Aiden says, I never got into Dungeons and Dragons due to where I live. That's understandable, but if you ever have the opportunity to play a little bit of it or watch a little bit of it being played, I think it's pretty amazing. I enjoy it quite a lot, obviously, seeing as my VTuber self is a D&D tiefling, and here I am doing kind of a stream on D&D and what it means to me and where I've been able to go with it. So if you ever have the opportunity to dip your toes in it, you might find that you really like it, if that's your sort of thing. And Collie says it's a very imaginative and flexible game played with others. Yes, it is. And I want this so badly for others. I want them to have the same kind of positive, naturally inclusive experience that I did. But when I see the kinds of things that have happened after the combat chair was released, and still do see this happening, so even though this article was written back in the summertime, I still see this happening, and it still upsets me. It makes me livid. It makes me sad and frustrated that a community who should be the most open-minded, the most accepting, and the most welcoming of different people capable of different things in different ways is showing itself to be the opposite. Is showing itself to not only be closed-minded, but viscerally opposed to anyone or anything attempting to equalize gameplay. And this has to stop. This isn't my tabletop community. So basically what I'm referencing here, Aiden, is what's going on is I'm reading kind of an old article of mine in which I was talking about what happened in the tabletop community after Mustang's Art, aka Sara Thompson, released their combat chair, and people sort of couldn't handle it. Yes, and I also made some memes that I posted to my Twitter account. That's also kind of in relation to this, but not in this time period exactly, but we'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to start this cast by kind of giving some context for a lot of that. And I've shared my story not because I want to sit here in my wheelchair or in my on my disc, as it were, and be praised for being some sort of trailblazer, but because I think it's necessary for people to understand how important this community is and how much a positive, loving community has made me the strong, creative person I am today. It's part of what has given me the courage now to pursue a bit of a career in virtual YouTubing, to bring disability representation and accessibility there too. I think it's necessary for the community to understand what it's been like for players and dungeon masters like me, especially with everything Sara Thompson has been through over this on Twitter. I think people need a reality check. I think they need to realize that this invention of theirs was only a matter of time. People like me were playing Dungeons and Dragons with disabilities long before they brought it to a more public forum. People like me were coming up with solutions for how or how not to represent our disabilities in game if we wanted to do so. But like me, those were small, isolated incidences. But the need was still there. It was always there. It was just never embodied so visibly or proudly. So don't think that their combat chair is just some kind of attempt to get another inclusion notch in their belt. We have been looking for something like this, and they were just the one who had the courage to make something. They started a conversation, and I hope that my story doesn't detract from that conversation, but rather underlines the importance of it and how unnecessary the negative reaction to their work has been. They're right. Everyone deserves to be a hero, and everyone deserves a seat at that table, whether they roll, hover, or walk there. And so yeah, that was pretty much the article I wrote. I never, like I said, I never got it published anywhere or anything like that. But it's funny to me how much, even 5, almost 6 months on, this stuff still needs to be said. Especially because of a new release that actually is being planned for another book in the Dungeons and Dragons series of books for 5th edition, which is apparently their first wheelchair accessible idea of dungeons, basically, and it is called Candlekeep Mysteries. And so I wanted to read that article of mine to sort of give you some context as to what I'm about to say in relation to this. So, from what we know so far, Candlekeep Mysteries, as you can probably read through my scribble, includes 17 adventures from 19 different designers. And I'm gonna just go ahead and read this, and as I'm reading it, I'm gonna give some commentary and things like that. And I'm reading a little bit of your comments here, and you're right, Aiden. They should be more positive and supportive, but I don't understand this, but there are a lot of people that are still giving Sara some guff about even creating that magic item, as Kali says, which is, part of the reason I wanted to talk about it, and I think that it's unfortunate. They really shouldn't continue to have this amount of backlash from a community that I see that they've done a great service to. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this, but you guys go ahead and you guys go ahead and leave me comments, and I will read them. And so Aiden says, "WTF? Why do people need to care if it's including people with disability?" Well, I know you'd think that they would just let bygones be bygones, and they would say, "Cool, yay for inclusion." But apparently, there are a lot of people that are like, "Oh no, we can believe in dragons and other magic items that create zombies and bring people back from the dead, but oh no, we don't want wheelchair users, and we don't want real wheelchairs in our dungeons. Oh my goddess, I don't really get it either. It is a really positive thing, and I don't understand why there are people in this community who don't just see it as that. They see it as, oh no, now we're having to include them, and this is supposed to be fantasy, and you're supposed to be escaping your disabilities or escaping these unpleasant things, and why are you forcing people to be in wheelchairs? And it's like, well, it's a pride thing, It's like, and this is, it's what I said in actually one of the very first videos I ever made that had to do with the combat chair. As I said, it's not about forcing us to be in an unpleasant situation even in roleplay. It's there for pride. It's there for accuracy of representation. It's in fact the reason why I'm on a disc. Like, even as my VTuber persona, or any time that I have played one-shots since getting into VTubing, that's the same reason I've done everything that I've done, is because it's like, yes, I could be just about anybody I wanted to be. I could be a fully able-bodied dragonborn, or I could be, a vampire, or any other thing that I wanted to be, but I feel like that wouldn't be accurate. Let's see what Collie says here. And bards boning dragons. Yeah, and artificers making cool mecha. But, oh my god. An artificer making a wheelchair able to go into combat. Nah. Yeah, I agree with you, Collie. That's that's just real crappy. So I'm gonna go ahead and start reading this article. I'm sorry if it's boring to you guys if I read, but I mean, I love my books and I love my lore and I love to read, so and besides, this way I can make sure I get my facts and my wording straight, which is the other reason I'm doing this. Okay, so this article, as you can see, that was published on Polygon. That's what we're gonna read. So it says, the next Dungeons and Dragons book, published by Wizards of the Coast, will include the franchise's first official adventure that is wheelchair accessible, titled Candlekeep Mysteries. The collection of 17 one-shot adventures will be published on March 16th and will feature the work of 19 different designers. Candlekeep Mysteries will be different from any other book released so far for the 5th edition of D&D. Rather than a single campaign that takes characters from level 1 through level 5 or 10, it's a collection of much shorter, unconnected experiences. Each one will be designed to serve as a one-shot, a common term for an adventure suitable for just one gameplay session, between 2 and 4 hours. They also all share a common theme: books. And so now we have some quotation. It originated out of the need to provide dungeon masters with short adventures that they can easily integrate into their Forgotten Realms campaign, or into any other campaign, really, that has in it a library, said Chris Perkins, D&D's principal story designer, in a press briefing. Each adventure is built on the premise of the characters finding a book, which I love. Yes, as Collie says, ooh, books. Sounds like it's up my alley. Yeah, well, it definitely is. And I like the fact that maybe the central building for all of this is, in fact, a library, which I think is cool. I think it's really interesting, though, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's interesting that they say, oh, this book originated out of a need to provide dungeon masters with short adventures that they can easily integrate into their Forgotten Realms campaigns. Okay. Like, I understand that's a bit of PR, but if you ask me, I don't really like that, because how are you going to say that your specifically wheelchair accessible dungeon book originated out of that first stated reason right there? Yes, Tiefy has her critique mode on. That sounds like some dragon dookie to me, because it's very specifically a disability centered or wheelchair accessible centered adventure. There is a big ghost in the room, as far as I'm concerned, that's being kind of not mentioned here, but we'll get to that in a second. Each adventure is built on the premise of the characters finding a book. That book is what propels a mystery that the characters feel compelled to solve, which leads them on a grand adventure. Okay, that part is fine. There's just some other things we're gonna talk about in a second. And it says, for the past several years now, Wizards of the Coast has been welcoming more and more freelance designers into the fold through the Dungeon Masters Guild. Built in partnership with One Bookshelf, the makers of Drive-Thru RPG, it also offers revenue sharing with independent creators. Perkins tapped into this ecosystem of new voices, as well as the wider freelance marketplace, to build the team behind Candlekeep Mysteries. This is where I'm going to start having a problem. So it lists the authors included. Lots of people here. And I'm sure they're all good. I really wish that they would kind of disclose to you in some of these, like, you know, what these authors are known for. And I think that D&D Beyond has started doing some spotlights on some of these adventures and some of the creators behind these adventures. But even without me reading these names, is there one name that you don't see here that you think should be here after what I've kind of talked about? Maybe it's one Mustang's art, aka Sara Thompson, should be on here. Yes. She's not on here. And on that note, and I'm gonna try to keep this so that I'm not getting into their business and I'm not creating more trouble for them, because that's not what I want to do this for. But I did reach out to Sarah and I asked them, I said, hey, so did you know about this Candlekeep Mysteries that's going to be released by Wizards of the Coast? And I asked her, I wanted to know what your thoughts are on this, and I want to know if they actually invited you to participate in this. And they responded to me, and they said, yes, I know about Candlekeep Mysteries, and no, they did not invite me to contribute. There was no offer made. And because apparently I wasn't the only person who asked them about this, they actually had to make a tweet about it on Twitter and say, for the record, nobody from Wizards of the Coast made me an offer to create any sort of adventure for this collection, which, if you ask me, is one of the most cruddy things you can do, especially because Sara Thompson does work as a disability consultant and as a disability content creator for other RPGs and other things like that. This is what she does, you know, pretty much as this is what they do pretty much as their thing, right? So this just is not okay with me. And when I told them that I felt that that was a pretty cruddy thing to do, she said, well, yeah, but there's nothing I can do. And they said, I'm glad that they had, some of these other people working on it and things. But I don't know. That makes me beyond angry, but let's continue on, because I have something in this article that I'm going to touch on to sort of underline that. So it says, among the designers on hand to give the press a preview of their contributions was actor and producer Jennifer Kretschmer, part of the Silver and Steel actual play group. Last summer, Kretschmer put lots of energy into creating accessibility and gaming resource. She said it was important for her to make sure that her adventure was available to everyone. It is not something that is new to tabletop gaming or new to D&D, but it was important to me to make accessibility part of my dungeons, Kretschmer said. As an ambulatory wheelchair user, I wanted people to have the opportunity to see themselves represented in game. We have the ability in fantasy to imagine things. We don't have to pay to make those things accommodations. This is something we can imagine in our brains, and it's there. So it's something that was really important to me to put into my design. Okay, so I'm gonna address that in a second, but it's this next paragraph. In fact, there was quite a bit of buzz about accessibility in tabletop role-playing games last year. This was thanks in part to Sara Thompson, who goes by the handle Mustang's Art on Twitter. The designer and consultant created the Combat Wheelchair, a D&D supplement available for free online. It has since been incorporated into the official canon of Matt Mercer's Critical Role. There's even a line of figures suitable for at-home 3D printing from Sara Miniatures. Okay? So, on that note, I actually did kind of win a writing contest that was being hosted by Sara Miniatures around the combat chair, and so that's pretty cool, but that's neither here nor there. But I wanna just touch on. This is where I really don't want to offend people, but I really gotta say that the quote they have from Kretschmer, like, it's good, obviously, and I'm glad to see that they do use a wheelchair themselves, so in that way they are part of the community. But, and I may be biased, but I just read through these paragraphs and I read through that list of contributors, and the only thing I'm left with thinking is, why isn't Sara, being the one on here, having a brilliant quote like that? They've had brilliant quotes like that, and they've had that view for a long time too. And, yes, accessibility has been a big issue, but it was Sara who made the biggest impact about it. The whole reason, this is my argument right here. The whole reason that we even have a creation necessary of Candlekeep Mysteries is not because Dungeon Masters needed something more modular for their other adventures. It's not because, well, we just needed some more content or something. No. It is because Sara went and created their item last year and it blew up on Twitter. The only reason we are having any of this being created right now is because of what they set in motion. The only reason. And all of these other people, I'm not going to sit here and say they weren't working on stuff before this, because I haven't looked at enough of these other creators and what work they've been doing. So I can't really say that they haven't been, but to say that Sara Thompson was just a small part of the buzz that was created, as I told them when I wrote them, I said, you were the whole part of it. You were and are the whole reason wheelchair use has gotten any visibility and has gotten any traction anywhere, especially in Critical Role. And I'm gonna address this. I don't mind if I'm being proven wrong later. I hope I am. But the whole thing was the fact that their combat chair was on Critical Role, and Matt Mercer himself asked Sara whether he could use their combat chair on Critical Role. It's good visibility. It's great visibility. It's a great nod to her. But there's a problem with it. And the problem is, from my perspective, okay? Keep this in mind for anyone who's going to watch this cast later. From my perspective, being that Matt Mercer is able-bodied, for him to create a character to use the combat chair with, and then play it himself, is a little bit of what I would consider, for our demographic, cultural appropriation. Yes, I know I just said a word that's probably going to get a bunch of people cheesed off. But that's what I feel about it. Because from my point of view, since nobody is doing physical in-person games really right now, I don't know about the Critical Role team, but it seems like if they were really going to do Sara a service to their item, to their combat chair, they would have invited them to play a character of their own design, of their own creation, as part of Critical Role. That would have been the best thing to do, because then Sara gets to take control of their item. They not only get to be seen using their item and a character that they are playing using their item, but then it really makes the representation about the creator themselves. And the reason I'm having such an issue with this is I know that Matt has gone on record defending Sara and her item, and that's awesome. But the other thing I've seen happening, and it breaks my heart, and this is the reason I call it appropriation, is because even with mentioning that it was Sara who created the combat chair because Matt Mercer is playing it. A lot of people watching Critical Role mistakenly think that Matt Mercer or Critical Role in general created the combat chair, and they didn't. They didn't create it. And so this is my problem. Is that by not allowing Sara to play a character in Critical Role using their combat chair, this is what's happened. This is what happened. Is that some people now look at Matt Mercer and say, oh, he created it. You know, he created it for his dwarven character. Like, it's a child of his brain, and it isn't. And I was talking to another friend of mine who is a streamer with a disability about this and how much I should talk about it. And they said, you know, I shouldn't, you know, get too fired up and go after people, which I'm not trying to do here. But I'm saying, wouldn't it have been a truly supportive move to make Sara some of these offers, not only to make contributions to this Candlekeep Mysteries, which is wheelchair accessible, okay? This is why I had an issue with what they say in the beginning with this press release. It's wheelchair accessible for a goddess damned reason, okay? It's so that it can accommodate a wheelchair. Who made the wheelchair? Sara did. They made the combat chair. And yet there's this wheelchair accessible dungeon. So what it's almost like is they decided, well, since there was so much negative feedback from our other player bases about the combat chair and about her, this is my guess, okay? I don't know if I'm right. This is my insight roll. My insight roll says that because there were too many toxic people in the D&D role-playing community at large, that Wizards of the Coast said, well, we need to make something that's wheelchair accessible, but we're not going to invite them, aka Sara Thompson, because, well, they kind of galvanized the community. That's my belief. So, and take it for what you will, and I hope that Sara doesn't get, I hope that she doesn't get, like, that they don't get angry at me for getting angry for them. I'm going on stream about it, but it's not a good look. And because it basically says, okay, we're going to make a series of wheelchair accessible adventures. But we're going to just have this ghost of Mustang Arts combat chair wheeling around. But we're not going to say anything, and we're not going to invite them. to make anything. We're going to go with these other creators instead who weren't so upsetting to the status quo or so upsetting to whatever you want to call it, right? That's my belief, and I'm don't have anything negative to say about the people who were asked to contribute. I think that's fine and that's dandy, but to me, it's the equivalent of, in your world, you have leaders like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or any individual like that who has become the, not just the figurehead, but the center of like these movements. To me, Sara Thompson is the same. They are the same for the tabletop community and the disability community. And so for them not to be included and only mentioned, you know, that was like the most. That was like the least thing that they were obligated to do. And I know that this article is not associated with D&D Beyond and, you know, Wizards of the Coast and anything like that. So, you know, Polygon's not necessarily who I'm having issue with. What I'm having issue with here is that this article pays Sara the bare minimum of attention, which, you know, at least they gave them something, yes. But the bigger problem I have is that now we have this whole adventure that doesn't have Sara being a contributor. As I said earlier, they've already been doing work like this for other companies. They have already been doing this for other titles and other things like this, and they weren't reached out to. And yet, someone like Matt Mercer can reach out to them about using their combat chair on Critical Role. Okay? So, I don't know what more to say about that other than it's not a good look. And I will be getting Candlekeep Mysteries only because I want to see what exactly they mean by wheelchair accessible, because here's the other issue that I have with this in general. Yes, I will be getting Candlekeep Mysteries, but not because I'm like supporting Wizards of the Coast for not including her. What I am doing this for not including Sara, what I am doing this for is to look at it as a tiefling with a disability, as someone who has used her assistive arcane disc in dungeons to create accessibility without the dungeon itself needing to be made accessible. So why I'm bothering to even spend my gold pieces on this is not because I support them. It's because I want to see what they mean when they say wheelchair accessible. I want to see how far does the disability dialogue go on this. That's what I'm after. Is I'm saying, okay, so what did you do? Just eliminate stairs? Did you just make doors wider? Did you just eliminate the lips between inside and outside, what did you do? And yes, I'm being kind of mocking here. As a disc user, because I really do want to know. If it's truly wheelchair accessible, what does that mean? We don't have much detail yet. I'm also wondering if they're going to put any other disability dialogues into these adventures or not. Because the thing is, to me, what would be more valuable is having a dialogue where you actually make items like Sara Thompson's combat chair that are designed to help with access in an item. Not just make a whole series of accessible dungeons so that we have like a separate adventure or something. You know, I get that they're saying, well, they're modular and can fit into other campaigns. Okay. Then why is there so much emphasis on a wheelchair accessible, like, dungeon? Aren't you guys just creative enough to make magic items and make things that if characters were to use them, the dungeons would be accessible? Which is why Sara Thompson made the item the way they made it. The wheelchair has hover mechanics. The wheelchair has combat mechanics. It has things that you can do to improve its ability to go over rocky terrain. There's even things you can do to make sure that it can move in water and in swamps and things like that. There are upgrades you can get to make it so that the wheelchair makes the adventure accessible, not the other way around. Or at least not in the way that Candlekeep Mysteries seems to be approaching this. Which is, oh, okay, well, we'll just make the dungeons accessible and that'll be enough. No. The whole reason the combat chair was the item it's supposed to be was because this is like, no, we don't want to have like a separate area for the people in wheelchairs who play Dungeons and Dragons. We want Dungeons and Dragons itself to be accessible. Anyway, and I don't know. You know, I hate to be harshing on this before I've even read the book, so I'm gonna stop my little fiery critique right there, because I'm gonna have to look at everything in detail, which is another type of content that I am gonna do when this book comes out. I actually do want to look at it chapter by chapter as a tiefling VTuber with a disability to say, well, what is it like? And let me catch up on comments. Yes, Kali, I do intend to review it. And then Aiden says, like, people on Twitter will take the deepest jab at your life and problems, but the same person who could get shattered in a fight. Wow. Seems like these adventures might be watered down on physical danger levels. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm afraid of too. Like that, it's just made to be like this. Oh, it's safe for the poor, fragile individuals with disabilities who might be playing a disabled character. You know, we can't let them start out having a real adventure. We gotta make sure the dungeon's accessible. I mean, that's only gonna be fun if it's not patronizing as all hell. And I don't know if it's gonna be or not. I have no idea. But let me go ahead and finish the article. And let's see. Aiden says, why do people need to be treated differently for having disabilities? I don't know. I don't think we should be treated differently. I think we need to have our differences acknowledged and accommodated, which I understand Candlekeep Mysteries is trying to do by saying, hey, it's a wheelchair accessible dungeon. But it just feels like they might only be looking at access in tabletop role-playing games from like a very literal physical thing, which is one of the last points that I want to make in tonight's cast, is that accessibility in tabletop roleplay is so much more than, okay, we'll just build an accessible dungeon. And things like that. And then Collie says, unfortunate, but don't know, Aiden. It's a big underlying issue that still needs looking at. And Aiden says it happens outside of this problem. People just treat people for being different. Yeah, and that is a big problem, and that kind of feeds into my final point, which I'll get to after I finish up this article. Is it says Wizards has published several anthologies for 5th edition, including Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which makes me think, maybe they should just rename this as like Ghosts of the Combat Chair or something. And Tales from the Yawning Portal. However, those books included adventures that were much more substantial. Again, my concern that these adventures are not going to be substantial. Intended to be revised versions of older material. Candlekeep Mysteries promises all new content. Still, I'm hoping it's not watered down. Okay, I'm just putting that out there. Most important to Perkins, however, is the opportunity to kick off the new year with creative, inspiring adventures. For fans of D&D to riff on throughout 2021. And it says, what is wonderful about this is, with so many adventurers, you get to see a huge variety of what D&D can be, Perkins said. Every adventure is unique. Every adventure got a weird twist or take. I think that people will be able to pick this product up and find one or more things that they're just going to be aching to want to play to put in their games. Okay, well, that's fine and dandy, but again, I'll have to see what all they've really put in this. And for that price of, 45 or more gold pieces is pretty pricey for something that basically they're saying, well, okay, this is like a separate series of adventures because people with disabilities need a separate series of adventures or something. No. What we need is people like Sara Thompson to create honestly accessible content, and that includes magic items geared toward accessibility, like my modified version of Tensor's Disc, or like the combat chair, or anything else, prosthetics even. And yes, those already exist in D&D to some extent. But it would be really nice to see that Wizards of the Coast, instead of making an alternate version of D&D, D&D accessible, or D&D wheelchair friendly, that they just made regular D&D wheelchair friendly. But that brings me to my final point, which is, while I think this is a good move in the right direction to be even making something like Candlekeep, the fact that Sara was left out of this and that whole critical role thing I brought up, my final point I want to make has to do with that no matter if we have a combat share, if we have a modified tensors disk, if we have Candlekeep Mysteries, that doesn't really matter in the long run if we don't change what's going on in the community. And I don't want this to sound like a blanket statement, because there are many in the D&D and tabletop role-playing communities who are very aware and who are very inclusive to players with disabilities and who are very keen on making sure that disabled characters and players with disabilities get the airtime and get the space that they need. But outside of that part of the community, there is a huge part of the community, and in fact a huge culture, that seems to not provide space or pacing for people with disabilities. And that's my final talking point, which is we need to do something about this culture. Let me just catch up on chat before it disappears. Cully says, and players and DMs to be both accepting, respectful, and inclusive to players, characters with disabilities that use assistive equipment. And he says, kind of like in that recent one-shot experience you had. Well, more in the negative versus the positive, yes. And that is kind of what I want to talk about briefly, is that since I've gotten into VTubing, I've had a couple good experiences in one-shots with D&D where I am playing well myself. Me on my floating disc as part of a one-shot adventure, and the positive experiences I had, I can very much attribute to my other party members. More than anything else, that my other party members were more than willing to accommodate my particular dialogue, my particular way that I wanted to move around the dungeon. And kind of the way I had to function based on my physical stats, how my disability showed up, and how I was using magic to assist and sort of mitigate the disability in my own way. It's why I call my arcane disc and things like a mage hand or an unseen servant as an arcane assist device, or in this case, an arcane assist spell. And so with some of those groups, I had great success, I felt, in being a contributing party member and being seen for my strengths despite my weaknesses, because the players were willing to engage me in the dialogue I was bringing forth. They were willing to be conscious and conscientious of why I was speaking about the things that I was speaking about, and why I was in fact role-playing the way I was role-playing. And that's what made the difference between a highly successful one-shot session in both of the times in which that occurred. There was a lot of player-on-player engagement and respect for how I was using my disc and why I was using my disc and how I was helping the party. In my most recent experience, that wasn't the case. And I don't want to sit here and, be mean to anybody. That's not really the reason I'm bringing this up, but for whatever reason, the last group that I was in a one-shot with, there just was not that level of connection I felt. I felt like, me being on a disc was acknowledged, but I felt like nobody really cared to pay attention to what I was trying to bring up or the way in which I was trying to roleplay. And it could have just been because the scenario did not really encourage teamwork in the same sense. I don't feel that it did anyway, because it was sort of this us versus them sort of thing, and there was no cohesion really, because most of the party just wanted to go for the stated objective of the one shot, while I'm sitting on my disc saying, well, what happens if we don't do that? Like, can we do something else? Can we try a different objective? But what I really want to get around to, because I think just hanging on that, makes it sound like I'm just upset because, nobody took my advice. No. My upsetness has more to do with that there were a lot of things to do with my disc that I felt in terms of the language and the way that things were described. Even as much as the DM tried to make a nod, I felt that some of the way that I ambulate in game was just sort of brushed over. Because it got treated as an aggregate, and I know that part of that is, yes, the session was rushed. But for me as a player and as my character, when words such as you walk or run over someplace, or you climb these stairs, or you climb these obstacles, even though I'm treated as the aggregate, I'm like, but I don't walk. Like, the whole point of me using this disc is because I don't ambulate in that way. And so I know that the DM was trying, and so I want to give them props for that. And I know that whenever I have been on these one-shots, I really challenge them to do something that they don't do a lot, which is make room for people of all different sorts to get into D&D and enjoy playing it. And I think that's a really great thing that they do. But because I challenge them to make room for people with disabilities, like, I'm honored that my very presence in a game forces this. That's kind of the reason why I've been so stubborn about even the way my models are represented. My both versions of myself. And I went over that in my debut. Is because if you don't insist on it, you don't force other people to widen their world view and widen their perspective, right? So in that sense, I feel good that I'm challenging this DM and many others to accommodate a dialogue and a way of moving around that's very non-standard. But at the same time, I feel like more work needs to be done, and maybe I'm the Tiefy that needs to do that work. Maybe I'm the one who needs to start hosting some one-shots where I do make that my focus, and I do have players with disabilities on, so that I kind of showcase what I did for other people before I even got into VTubing, which is be a DM with a physical disability who makes a space for maybe other players with disabilities who might want to have an experience and have a different way of doing things. Let me check up on chat here because I see you guys are leaving me messages. So Collie says, those are indeed assistive magic spells in D&D. For you, Tiefy, you hover or rise using levitate. Yes. And yeah, I do agree that that would be a good thing for me. There's a lot of things I'm still trying to get in order and wrap my little head around how I'm gonna do. But yes, I truly am embodying be the change you wish to see in the world. Yes. Because the fact of the matter is, waiting on other people to do that for you is not how it works. And that's ultimately why Sara Thompson got so much support and so much attention for their combat chair, is because they made something they wanted to see in D&D. And so I guess the same applies to me, that if I want to create a more inclusive space and a more accommodating space for disability dialogues in D&D and in roleplay and in the way characters are designed and in the way players get to engage, then perhaps I'm the one who needs to provide that. And who knows, maybe breaking open Candlekeep Mysteries and using that as a basis for some one-shots, encouraging people to have some assist devices that could really use, I don't know, a wheelchair accessible dungeon. Maybe that might be where I start out. Because I've always wanted to see what it would be like to run some pre-made modules, actually, because I'm used to the other way around. I'm used to running whatever I feel like. And so I think it would be interesting as a form of like critique and also exploration to do that, to actually be the tiefling VTuber with a disability on her disc running some Candlekeep one-shots as the way that I sort of debuted that sort of aspect. And I'm saying it right now on this cast so that if I start getting, cold little feet around this, just, that you guys can remind me and support me in doing this, because this would be a huge leap. I'm used to DMing in different environments, and so doing it for the VTubing community would be great, but it would definitely be a challenge because sometimes they end up being kind of shy. But it would be good practice for sure, and because they're one-shots, it would give me a nice modular thing to do with maybe a couple different groups with access as the main focus, as written but to then say, okay, as players and DMs, what did we think about this? And actually get people's opinions after the one-shots about, did you like this content? Is this really, is this a good addition or not, from people within the community? I think that would be great to kind of, as the mist on her disc, to kind of spearhead that in a way. And of course, I am going to also be paying attention to what other people do around this Candlekeep Mystery content when it comes out, because I know that there are a lot of channels who already cover every bit of D&D content that is released, whether that's Unearthed Arcana or a new book release. So I'm also going to be looking through my Scriball at those channels as well, so that I can have something to say about whatever they may say as well. Just because I know a lot of them may not be coming from a purely disability focused, which, if you know anything about me by now, you know that that's kind of my thing. So, yeah, that's kind of one idea I have. But I guess I just want to end this cast with a PSA, and I hope this comes across as not mean, and not that I'm trying to pick fights with anyone or degrade anyone or make anyone feel bad. But I want to say, if you are a DM or a player, whether you are doing a one-shot or a campaign, please, for the love of the goddess, if you have a player in that one-shot or that campaign who has a disability and who also wants to play a character who has a disability, please make sure that you as the DM are prepared to help them with that dialogue and help them get the most out of that dialogue. Make sure that you do the work to reframe your language so that you do not ability wash someone if they move differently. Make sure that you give them time and space to do their quote-unquote rituals, whatever that might be. Whether that's adjusting, a set of bracers for their feet, or adjusting their walking cane, or adjusting their wheelchair, or casting their arcane disc. Give them the space to do those rituals, because those are an important part of roleplay. Those are an important part of making disability part of the fantasy setting. If you just gloss over it and you're like, okay, yada yada yada, you get dressed, you eat breakfast, yada yada yada. Like, for a lot of people with disabilities, and especially even for me as a tiefling with a disability, like, my morning rituals are not just I get up and I go have breakfast and I go about my day. There are a lot of spells and a lot of rituals I have to cast to get ready for the day. And I would really like to be in a setting in which it wasn't so much about, go now, hurry, go beat up the monster, go get the quest, go do the thing, that other players could actually get the feeling of how this character with a disability, whatever it is, moves and interacts with the environment. But if we don't allow for that, then we're basically saying everyone moves and acts the same way. Everyone experiences their routine the exact same way. And that's just not the case. The other thing is, if you are a player and you know that there's going to be a person with a disability in your game, I'm not about what I'm going to say next. I'm not saying it to be like, oh my gosh, us, role players with disabilities, you can't say and do certain things, whatever, because you don't want to hurt our little wheelchair using feelings, okay? A lot of us are tougher than that, believe me. With what we've had to go through in life, we're tougher than that. But let me say this unequivocally and clearly. If someone in your group is using an assist device, please do not, for the love of the goddess, disrespect that assistive device. Whether it's an arcane disc, a combat chair, a animal helper companion, do not disrespect that device. And what do I mean by disrespect? I mean do things in roleplay like, oh, I take a piece of meat and I try to distract the dog that she's riding on, because it'd be funny if the dog just went running after the meat while she's stuck on him. Or, I'm going to just lean against this combat chair over here because I can. Or like what happened to me in a couple of the one-shots, to basically insinuate using my disc as only a thing to carry items on. And I know you could probably look at me and say, Tiefy, for goddess sake, you're being too sensitive about this stuff. And can't you just take a joke? Well, to me, there are certain things you don't joke about. You don't make light of. It's the same kind of attitude that I brought up earlier with the combat chair, where people on Twitter were saying, oh yeah, you could just put a pair of stairs or a pit in front of them and that would stop the hero in a wheelchair. It's the same kind of dragon shit, okay? Because basically, for me, that item is an extension of myself. That is an extension of my body, and to have it used or insinuated that it's being used without asking my permission, first of all, and second of all, just saying that, oh, like in the last game I was a part of, that we just put a dead body on the disc. That's not okay, and I know that they may have thought they were doing it to be funny or include me, but if you think about it, my disc is like the equivalent of your car in your world, or, your backpack, or something that you consider to be like a part of you, that if someone just said, okay, I'm going to open up the front passenger seat of your car and just dump all these items in there and not even say anything to you and just close the door and walk off, or insinuate that they're going to put one of their fallen comrades just in the passenger seat, don't you think if that were your car, or if that were your lap or the chair you're sitting in or something, don't you think you'd be like, okay, well, I didn't give you permission to even touch my car, let alone open it up and put crap in it, And I just feel like it needs to be said. And I hi Shadow, thanks for coming. I'm not sure where you came in at, but yeah, I was just kind of talking about stuff in my most recent experience with a one shot and sort of not having the respect around my arcane assist device that I kind of expect to have. So, but I'm glad you could join me, and so I guess that's my ending point is don't do that. If someone in your adventuring party uses an assist device, please be respectful to that. Because if you're not going to be, it's almost like you're also not respecting the person who's desiring to roleplay in that way. So, if we want to talk about inclusion and accessibility for Dungeons and Dragons, it's going to take more than a combat chair. It's going to take more than Candlekeep Mysteries. It's going to take a fundamental awareness shift in people who play Dungeons and Dragons. To say, okay, these people with disabilities deserve to be here. They deserve to play the game. And if they want to, they deserve to play characters with disabilities and have those respected and treated as the heroes that they are designed to become. Not as slapstick, not as, oh great, you're just trying to make us include you because, diversity or whatever. We really need to change that. And I don't even really know where to begin except to be a tiefling who provides more of those environments and reminds people that we do need to be inclusive. And it's not being inclusive in the way of like, oh, we can't talk about that or we can't, reference their disability. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is everybody needs to have a conversation about how that person with a disability wants to be included. And like I said, that goes for no matter how long or short the game is. And if people are not willing to have this discussion, then that's also where we need to be better. Because DMs and players already have a lot of discussions. I've had many of them with my players in the past about what do you want to have happen with your character? How do you want to deal with this trauma? Or how do you want to deal with this aspect of things? That's all it takes. But unfortunately, what it takes in order to do that is for people to slow down and not do everything so fast and to say, okay, well, maybe we need to shift the focus away from all of these like typical things. And all that, and shift into something else that actually requires would-be players and would-be DMs to be like, okay, so we have a player or players with disabilities, and so we have to accommodate not only their real life limitations, but we also have to be prepared to accommodate the story that they want to participate in telling without feeling like that story becomes a background note or a little narrative poop hanging off the end of like, here's what all the able-bodied characters are doing because because that's all we care about. I think that there can never really be true accessibility unless we also deal with the mindset. And yes, it's good to have tools like Candlekeep Mysteries to begin this. It's important to have a combat chair to highlight that physically and magically, right? But as Sara has proven, and as many of us have experienced, those items are going to do nothing until we actually address the fundamental access problem for Dungeons and Dragons, which is not just how you access the material, but how people without disabilities engage with that material. Or the players who want to roll up or walk up or hover up to their tables. So that's the note I'm gonna end it on. And as I said, I hope that rather than just being sort of angry or offensive, I hope that this really came across as like a valuable discussion, and that I'm just trying to get people I'm just trying to get people to be aware of this and be more conscious of it. Okay, and so Kali says, hey, Tiefy, when you're done with your stream points, why not do a Tiefy Q&A and ask some questions on how you handle access? Well, that's a great idea, Kali, and thank you for highlighting your message. Yes. Let's go ahead and do a Q&A. If people would like. While I'm waiting on you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and hydrate. But yes, there are a variety of ways that I have handled access. As kind of both a DM and a player. So I'm sure this next question from Colleen will help illuminate that. So you mentioned you getting dressed in the morning. How do you shift from your nightwear to your daywear? Mage hand, unseen servant, wait staff? Actually, well, it's that's a good question. Well, when I was younger, I used to use the keep wait staff a lot, and my mother used to help me quite a bit. But as I started showing more of an aptitude for magic, quite a lot actually, as a little kid, I was a little storm of arcana. It was not very well controlled, and so my mother and father both started teaching me some things from a very early age to use when dressing, and one of those things is a mage hand because it makes it easier for me to manipulate pieces of clothing and put them on and take them off more quickly. Also, an unseen servant is good for this, but they really do take a lot of direction to do this for you, and you have to be very specific. So unless you want to spend at least a half an hour making sure that the unseen servant knows exactly where to put your socks or your undergarments and how to put them on correctly, then you're probably going to quickly grow out of that and just get a mage hand and do it yourself. I've also just had my unseen servant hold like my legs or my tail in a particular position, and then use mage hand on top of the help in that way, to get a better access to certain body parts. I also will use things like my disc when I need to help with also putting on certain pieces of clothing, like my boots, for example. So sometimes I might conjure my disc and just rest my foot on it and put on my shoes and my boots that way, so I'm not having to reach too far to the ground. And it also kind of gives me a little more stable of a platform to shove my foot in if I need to, into the boot. And of course, obviously, I also use my disc for any of my other morning routines, such as using the washroom and things like that, or getting into the large family bath, things like that. The disc is very handy because it's almost like having a personal safe space on which to sort of move myself into these spaces that if I didn't have the disc, I wouldn't have very good balance. Now, I am starting to learn things like levitate. Levitate is a new thing I'm starting to learn to help me actually move my disc more up or down in a way that's useful. And then Trippy says, I was going to ask if you dismiss the disc if you don't need it, or if you keep it maintained throughout the day, or whether you but I suppose that answers my question. Well, that's still a good question. I will maintain the disc when I need it. Because it does take energy for me to maintain it. Like a consistent ritual when I don't need it. And this is actually part of the reason why I won't sit on my disc all day, every day. I will actually sit on it sometimes when I don't have any other choice. But that's actually a good question. Since it does take constant upkeep, what I will actually do is find chairs or other couches to transfer to for a while, so that I can dismiss the disc until I need to conjure it again, just so that my magic and stamina is not consistently and continually having to be used for upkeep. In that way, I would love to find a way through the goddess to maybe make my disc more like a mount, or something like my auntie and my cousin have, where they can just quickly summon their steed or summon their mount, and then it doesn't take any concentration after that point, and then they can just dismiss it or call it forth at will. That is something that I hope I will be able to grow into, or maybe that the goddess will bless me with the capability of doing. But for the moment, yes, I will use it, and then I will give myself to take breaks from using it until I need to conjure it again. Luckily, I have some slots that I can use to quickly cast my disc if need be. But yeah, so I kind of have had to develop a rhythm in which if the disc needs to be out, it's absolutely necessary that it be out, or that I make sure to give myself time to rest and be off disc, if that makes sense. And Colleen says, spirit disc mount could be modified that way. I imagine it could, since the goddess was the original one to modify the infernal tensor's disc that my mother was gifted via her patron. So that would be very interesting to see if she was feeling gracious enough to make such a thing, even without me having to have necessarily a paladin kind of thing like my cousin or my auntie has, or a mounted combatant type of feature. That would be cool. And I agree, it would be a really good evolution of that spell, honestly. You know? It would kind of be what do they call that? It would be a good next step, like an evolution that would be very believable for something like that. So that would be very exciting. And Chloe says, heck, spell evolution trees would be fun in D&D in general. Yes, and also, I think as a wizard of the scribes, which I actually am, I think that would be a cool thing for me to even try to write, is maybe use my mage and my scribeness to scribe a new spell or a new function for an old spell. Because I think that would be right up my alley and right up my capabilities to be able to do so, and would enhance the assistiveness of the arcane disc. Chloe says, use a spellsmith. You're right. Yep, definitely. A spellsmith all the way. Also a wordsmith. So why not put those two things together and make something that the spell hasn't been able to do before? Who better than a mage to do it? Well, I hope everyone's been having fun. I know this is like a really different kind of stream for me, but I appreciate everyone who's been sort of hanging out with me and asking questions and letting me talk about this stuff, because I was really kind of concerned about it. Because you know me, I like to be supportive and happy and loving and stuff, but there are just some things that when I get talking about them, I have to talk about them in a certain way. And so I just really appreciate you all being very understanding and just letting me, have this conversation and, of course, engaging with me. It's nice to not just be doing this cast and talking to myself into my scribble. It's nice to have all of you, just hanging out. And then Collie says, "Do you need assistance for anything else around the keep?" Yeah, I mean, I've grown to be pretty independent with a lot of things, but getting meals and getting to go places and things like that outside the keep, I do need help with. Even with my disc, things like mealtime, I still do need a lot of physical assistance with, even though I can, grab and reach a lot of things and levitate and move things a bit more. I still do have to have help with meals and everything like that, which you would know, Collie, because you've kind of been around enough to kind of know what sorts of things I need help with. And I'm sure you would be a very capable halfling tiefling with time on your hands. So, what are you saying, Collie? Are you saying that you want to officially work as my support bard? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that I should go to my mother and father and say, "So there's this halfling tiefling that I met, and he wants to come help me out"? Is that what you're saying? Well, I think that could be arranged, seeing as, you and I already hang out a little bit as it is. And, you've been nice enough to help me get around town on the few times that I've been able to get out and about myself. You've been nice enough to keep me company and make sure I get back home safely. So I'm sure I could convince my family at the keep, definitely my mother, for you to come give me a hand and also keep me a bit more company, since, my cousins are, off doing whatever they're doing, and my brother is off living his own life, So I'm sure that because you already have a good track record of making sure that I'm exactly where I should be and that I'm being kept safe, even when I go down to the Forked Tongue Bar and Grill, I'm sure at least my mother would vouch for you. My father, I'm not so sure. He tends to be very protective. But I'm sure I could convince him that you would be a very valuable asset. You will have to list for me more of your credentials. I assume since you've been hanging around the bar and grill, you must be a good cook. You must be excellent at cleaning as well. And if that's the case, you would certainly have a place at the keep, I imagine. We can always do with more cooks and more people to clean, and also just more people who are good and dependable at their job. Yay! Well then, I think maybe I could definitely get that arranged. And then Count Cerberus says, "Thank you, Tiffy, for speaking on these matters. I appreciate your insight and perspective." You're welcome. You're welcome. It's my pleasure, and thank you for highlighting your message so I would be sure to see it. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And also, I appreciate your support and kind words. I felt and still feel kind of nervous about having gotten as heated as I did on a few things, especially on behalf of someone like Sara Thompson, who I know it kind of has had to deal with a lot of this, so I'm hoping I don't create more of this for them. But I really felt like I had to say some stuff. So thank you so much for being so supportive and taking some time out of your night. It really means a lot. Yay. I like getting a thumbs up. It makes me happy. That level of happy. Um, and then Collie says, was it asked how you would handle long journeys if you were asked to for diplomatic reasons? No, it was not asked. Well, it depends on how I would be expected to travel there. Because my father has some ability to do a lot of teleportation magic, as it were. So technically, he could just do it where he makes a magic circle or a gate and basically makes it so that we can pretty much teleport there instantly or walk through, a gate and we're there. So in that sense, there wouldn't need to be very much accommodation specifically if it were done that way, because the travel would be fairly instantaneous, and so I wouldn't come up against the problems that I believe you are really referencing, which is, say if I didn't have the teleportation magic and I was going by carriage, and let's say I was going to Pinebrook, where my brother and my sister-in-law actually were engaged, and then they had some plans for a wedding and things like that. So in that case, if I were having to travel there by carriage, and by carriage it would take maybe a week or more, in that sense, there would have to be a lot of things that were accounted for, or that there would be a plan for, such as like making sure I have enough time for a bathroom break, or that there are enough safe spaces or accessible spaces for me to have a bathroom break on the way. So, I mean, in that sense, I would probably have to have some female guards, and they would have to help me find a place along the side of the road that I could access with my disc and then sort of use without, putting myself at risk, and while also being shielded from various other things that might be coming down the road. So, just like anyone on a journey, I would have to have a team of people that would assist me in making, bathroom trips, or, for instance, setting up camp at night. We would probably have to use something like a magical hut, essentially, which is also some magic that my father knows and that I have been eager to learn, which is sort of this magical hut that is both a force barrier and can also be a nice, cozy place for people to spend the night without necessarily having to have things be so inaccessible, like a bedroll or a tent, which might be very difficult for me because it would mean that I would have to sit or lay on the ground, and that's kind of uncomfortable for me. And then Collie says he would have to have visited those distant places before. So that means your father is not at home quite a bit. Correct. Yes, in order to do his teleportation magic or any kind of gate or anything like that, he has had to have visited that place before, and he has had to set it up magically in some way in order to do that. You are correct. He cannot just decide to go somewhere he hasn't visited. And that means, yes, he is not at home quite a lot. Between that and between being the dean of a college and handling stuff in New Nightingale, and also having had to be the one looking after the engagements for my brother and his wife, my sister-in-law, that took a lot of his time as well. And then Collie says, if you were ever jumped by a band of goblins or not nice creatures, how would you handle them? Well, it depends on how much of a jump they got on me. If I had any reason to think that there might be something amiss, I would probably put my protective spell on that I've got from the goddess, which would protect me from whatever entity that might be, whether it's good or evil, celestial, any kind of thing like that. I would probably put that on first. The other thing I might do is, if I had to, I would put on another kind of sanctuary type spell in which they would be at a disadvantage in attacking me, if that were the case, but it means that I would have to be a pacifist from that point on if I beg the goddess for sanctuary. In that case, I then cannot fight. So that would be the thing. Is probably my first instinct would probably be to try not to fight. And try not to get hit. I do have some magic armor I could put on, and if they did end up landing a hit on me, I might rebuke them. I might also use my words to damage them. If you've seen me in any of those one-shot misadventures, you know that it is kind of my style to do whatever psychic damage I can do. Because while I don't like speaking ill of people in general, if they are monsters and they cannot be reasoned with, then that would be sort of my mode if I could not make friends with them, or if I could not, talk them out of doing stuff. However, if they did manage to do something to me, I do think that I would possibly be able to rebuke them, rather than just mock them, and perhaps through my rebuke I might be able to do some more damage if the goddess were willing to give me such an ability. And Kali says, man, for as powerful as your two parents are, they didn't give you very many battle-heavy spells. No! And why do you think that is? Because the princess is not expected to fight. Okay, because my father wants me to be a nice lady, and so he doesn't really want me to learn the battle magic as much as I've been trying to convince him that, hello, at some point I'm going to have to find my, claws and my teeth, kind of like my mother, like, hello. I'm going to have to learn how to defend myself at some point. But no, he would rather that I know the good spells, the ritual spells, the good for a noble tiefling lady to have, such as mending or prestidigitation or, maybe, something like thaumaturgy or, maybe a vicious mockery. But it's been much more emphasis on supporting others so that they can protect me versus me doing the protecting. So it's why in that latest misadventure, you saw me doing an emboldening bond type of thing on people through my goddess to try to help them so that they could, do what they needed to do. So I'm very much more being trained. For now, I might change this, but for right now, I have been trained to support others before I am required to fight. Which is not very fun for me since my mother is known to be a powerhouse. My mother is known to be downright savage. And I mean that literally. I mean that aside from my mother being a Roman candle that I have mentioned in previous casts, she can be downright savage. Meaning that she can actually grow out her fingernails and her fangs to be actually claws and teeth that can do a serious amount of damage and can even be fairly acidic too. And so Kali says, I mean, for your Diablo 3 streams, even that mage has blasty battle magic. Yes! And now you know why that's so insulting. And now you know why, if you watch my very first cast, I actually do talk about that. My very first Diablo cast, I should say. I do talk about that. How the mage avatar I'm playing has way more capability to do battle than I do. And that was a very clear, specific choice on the part of my parents. But I may be overwriting that soon. Colleen also says, oh, emboldening bond. That's the ability of one of the new cleric subclasses. Yes. It's one of the new pathways for clerics, and I was not planning to, get some experience in that initially. But, with how much I'm going on about the goddess and what she's done for me, I went down to the temple before that latest misadventure, and I actually made even more of a bond with the goddess and said, well, since I am speaking of you often, and since I am speaking of you with as much devotion, perhaps there is a way I can serve you more directly, or at least see what that would be like if I ever happen to be on another adventure that I get whisked away to from my library, which, wouldn't you know it, shortly after that discussion, that's exactly what happened. And so as part of that discussion I had with the goddess, she said, well, dearie, since you tend to be so sweet and so concerned about people getting along, why don't you embody this aspect of peace? So I said, well, that seems like it would fit me. So I agreed. Now, I'm not sure how happy the goddess is with how things turned out during that last misadventure. I'm not sure if I served her well enough during that. But I do feel that I am more bonded and I am more empowered by her in sort of an interesting way. I might explore that more in the future, depending. And Collie says, oh wow, dang, your mom sounds pretty wild. Yes, she's very wild. She is not only just really good with fire, she is pretty much the idea of a feral tiefling. She pretty much embodies that, and I think part of it is she was found by my uncle in a crater, and so maybe that has something to do with it. But when you get her going, and when I said during my last Diablo cast that she is known to engage in a little bit of overkill and say, "Don't hurt my babies," usually that cry of hers is accompanied by totally embracing her primal and savage side. And it's not pretty, but she does like to indulge in it, especially because most of the time she has to act like the lady of the keep and be prim and proper. And so I think, like me, she enjoys moments where she just gets to let loose. Collie says, man, that sounds like quite the story. How a feral tiefling like your mom got to be the queen of a kingdom. Yes, well, that is quite the story. That actually might be one of the things I start putting down this year, since I did say I was going to be using a pen name and that I hadn't quite decided what I would write in that yet. I might choose that as something that I write as actually a bit of my lore that will exist in your world. Because I would love to be able to show that, yes, I am a writer. So it will definitely be story time when I get around to writing it. I haven't decided whether I should cast while I'm writing or not. Would that be something some of you might enjoy? You would get to see how I kind of work with my pseudo dragon if I did that. It might be kind of interesting for you guys to see. But it would also be interesting for me to balance conversation and writing, since I have to do both with my voice. But if that is something that you all might be interested in seeing, I will consider doing that, at least maybe somewhat. Or if not, streaming the actual writing process. I'd like to stream again where I actually get to read to you what I've written. I might just try one writing stream to see what that's like, just because I am kind of curious, even though it terrifies me at the same time. It might be worth a shot. I will have to see when I feel like doing that and everything like that. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, artists can balance drawing and streaming, but the problem is, Kali, they don't have to draw with their voice, is all I'm getting at. So if I had my pseudo dragon doing stuff for me, if I were talking to you the way I'm talking to you right now, my dragon would not be able to discern between transcribing what I'm telling you and trying to write a story at the same time. So if I did that, it would be a lot of back and forth between having to tell my dragon to not listen to me, engage with chat, and then tell her to start listening to me again. So again, like I say, I'm not against the idea, but for artists, I feel like it's a little bit different. And for writers too, who get to use their hands while typing, not their voice. So that's the only thing, is learning how to balance literally speech recognition through my dragon and chatting with everyone. But that doesn't mean that I won't give it a try. And then Kali says, yeah, good point. And then he follows up with, well, it seems fine for you to read to us afterwards. Yes. Yeah. What I could also do too is just record a bit of myself writing, kind of like I did the original Diablo streams, where I captured a bit of a cast with Diablo just to get used to the idea and practice. So if you guys did want to see what it's like for me to work with my dragon and train my dragon, I could maybe do some pre-captured cast with that. And just kind of show you how it works. And show you how her and I have to train together. And I agree, it was a good test run to read and have chat, and I think I did pretty well. I think I might just have to use some magic next time to highlight where I left off in where I was reading to you. I'll have to do that next time so that I remind myself with a bit of magic where I left off. So in case a lot of you ask me questions or I get sidetracked, then I have a slightly easier time finding my place. And Collie says, "Oh yeah, you could do that too as an off-stream thing on stream." Yeah, yeah. I think I'm excited to see what that could look like. I'm excited to show um you guys some more of my writing. You all some more of my writing. I did mention that I won a contest that was being held through Strata Miniatures, doing a combat chair related piece of fiction. And I've been really wanting to share that, but I haven't been able to, because basically I won the contest, and as I said in a previous stream, I believe it was even one of my Diablo casts, that because of that contest, I'm not really sure I'm allowed to share that quite yet, but I don't know. I might just run out of patience for that, but we'll see. Because there were things that were supposed to happen with that contest too that haven't quite happened yet, so who knows. Yeah. Either way though, I'm excited to show all of you more of my writing and indigestion. Again, it strikes again. Why? I try to stay calm, and I always get a little bit of an indigestion when I'm like doing this stuff. And then Collie says, "So do you still consider yourself a Barzard, like a bard wizard, or do you feel like being a Clarizard now?" I think that being a cleric wizard could be a good thing if I had more opportunities to really utilize some of the ceremony things that I can do, and some of the other enhancement things that I can do for a party if I'm given the time to perform the ceremony or the rituals required to give those benefits. And if I had party members that I felt were going to fully utilize the advantages I'm giving them, I think I have definitely some cleric in me. I definitely have that part of my personality. I think that I also do resonate with bard, if only for the bard class of the College of Spirits, or as I like to call it, the College of Muses bard, which allows you to channel a story through making contact with a spirit. And that is actually one of the things that I really wish that they would have put in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and they didn't, which is that College of Spirits bard, because I really like that idea. I really like that idea because I really resonate with that personally. In and out of character, that is very much how I relate to creativity personally, is that it feels very much like a spiritual experience in a way, or it feels like that I'm picking up on messages and personalities that are separate from me, but like have a desire to be heard. So if there was a way that I could, use my clericness, as in my spiritual sensitivity, part of that clericness, and sort of weave it into the Wizard of Scribes, and that domain of hope, which I think I know why the goddess made that way of the cleric. If you all will remember from a cast back in October, my mother's middle name is Hope. So in a way, I feel like the goddess made that cleric path as sort of a tribute to my mother. My mother, as I said, can be very savage, but she is also very kind, which is probably where I get it from. She is very kind, and she would much rather try to have peace between people and everything like that. And so I feel like that path of peace is almost kind of honoring my mother, because the whole tenet of it is like that you want to have hopefulness that people will get along, and that they'll work together for this higher goal or this higher purpose. And so I feel in a way that the path of peace is kind of in service to my mother, because you have to be a very hopeful person to want to embody that. And Kali says, so cleric of peace, bard of spirits, scribe wizard. That is quite the multi-class. You have to have high stats in all non-physical stats, int, wiz, charisma. Yes! But seeing as I don't have very good physical stats anyway, maybe that'll be okay. I don't know. That would be quite the multi-discipline to have. But at the same time, who knows? It could be a very cool way that I kind of represent some of my skills, or some of the ways that I like to see myself anyway. But anyway. Oh, my brain just kind of shut off there for a second. I hope that's okay with everyone. I'm like, what was I saying? What words did I say? I always want to have the right words. With a middle name like Felicity, I better have the right words, And then Collie says, yeah, I think you'd be okay. One of the only ways you could effectively do such a build, yeah? Yes. Tiefy brain go brr, yes. Oh my goodness. Alrighty. So, anybody else have one last question, for me? Cause I'm feeling like with my brain, wanting to, check out on me, now might be getting close to where I end the stream before I end up saying things and I'm like, why did I say it that way? Like, what did I say? Anyway, but I hope you guys have not been paying too much attention to that. I've tried to be as eloquent as I can and all that. Yay, thumbs up. Okay, Collie, you get a wiggle. You don't even have to redeem. There. Any more questions? Yay. Yes. When my brows go down, it's because I'm squinting to read what's in my Scribble. Oh well. No more questions? If not, that's okay. We've had a pretty good stream tonight, so I'm happy. This cast was definitely worth my stamina, and thank you all for redeeming some things. It really kept me going. Yay. Okay, so I'm really glad you guys enjoyed this. I'm really glad you all were here. If you enjoyed this kind of content and you would like me to do, some more D&D related stuff, either where I look at some content more in depth, I might be willing to do that. Heck, I might just even just do some things anyway. At least when Candlekeep Mysteries comes out, I'm gonna be looking at that. If I might see if I feel like doing anything like that before then, but if not, like, this was fun and I feel necessary to do. So I really appreciate all of you joining me. And I hope you feel like this was worth the couple of hours that you spent with me. So if there are no more questions, I'm gonna probably go ahead and start working my magic and getting ready to close out my cast. But first, I am actually going to see about possibly doing a raid. Does anyone have any suggestions for anyone who is on right now that I could possibly raid? I will look at your suggestions. I am also going to look through my Scribble here and see if there is anyone that I see who is on right now. Okay, we got a couple of good ones. I actually see that Clover artist. Collie, I was just gonna say that. I see that Clover artist is on doing D&D. I would love to raid them. Collie, do you remember how to do the raid? Oh boy. Ugh. My Scrabble and its casting stuff is really slowing down. Okay. Should I do it, Collie, or you want to do?